All right. Good morning, Covenant Christian Center. Thank you so much for joining us. We are very, very excited to be here. We're excited that you guys had a wonderful week in Miami. Pastor Kevin and Gail and the KGHM Ministries had a phenomenal time down there. I heard a lot of great things. For those of you who missed it, I'm sure that there's some videos on our Covenant Christian Center Facebook you can reflect on. But anyway, so welcome. Today is the 27th of January. So this is the last, what?
28th.
Is it the 28th?
Yeah.
Today is the 29th of January, and it is the last, I'm just kidding. It is the 28th, as I've been told, of January. This is the last Sunday of the first month of the year, which is wild to think about. It felt like January was 3 months long. I don't know about you guys, but it's been a really, really encouraging time for me. Just seeing the amount of change that can happen in 1 month. In my personal life and through all of my professional efforts as well, and through the men's group and those things. So it's just time really flies, but a lot can happen in a short period of time. So I had two things that I wanted to cover with you guys today, and I'm going to go an inch wide and a mile deep on both of them. So the first one is, why should we put God first in our lives? Okay, and the second one is, why should we persevere and find joy in trials? So these are a couple of topics that we've been talking about in the men's group the last week or two. We've really been hammering on those. Tuesday we covered James chapter 1. We just I put James chapter 1 into PowerPoints, and each slide was about 3 to 5 verses, and we just went kind of section by section because there's so much contained. Honestly, the whole book of James just has so much good stuff in it. So we went and we really did a study on that chapter, but some of those concepts really we had to go a little bit deeper on, just because every time we do one of the Faith Builders meetings, the first thing that we do is we ask everybody who's on what is something that they're grateful for, what is one of their goals, but what is something that they're being challenged with this week. And obviously that changes a lot, but when we have lately, it's been between 7 and 10 people usually on each meeting, and typically we find that a couple of the guys are struggling with the same thing. And what's great about James chapter 1 is I really feel like God put that on my heart, because it really spoke to a lot of the challenges that the men have been sharing over this last couple of weeks. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll go first with, how should we put God first in our lives? Hebrews 11:6 is where we're going to get started. So if you'll give me a second, I'll go ahead and turn there. I do have it bookmarked, so I'll give you guys a second to turn there. So this verse is Hebrews 11:6, and it says, "But without faith it is impossible to please God. For whoever comes to God must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly and diligently seek Him." And so there's really two parts in that verse. That without faith we can't please God. The title of our men's group is Faith Builders, and that is really the premise of the group, is that we are working on building our faith. And the guys that are there consistently, they're really having the opportunity to do exactly that. And it's really worked well for me as well. And part of that is a demonstration of our faith. So, for those of us who are going to those meetings faithfully and going to church and taking time and putting intention into our faith in order to grow it and taking like a more active role in building our faith, that's a demonstration of our faith, and it shows God that we want to have stronger faith and that we want to be able to please Him, right? And so the second part of that verse is that He rewards those who diligently seek Him. And that's kind of the point that I want to illustrate here with these next couple of verses. You know, we love the Lord because He first loved us, which is, that was the way that it was set up. But there's so much more to it. It's not just about the things that God does for us, but it's also, His mercy and His love. And there's just a hole inside of us that we're never going to fill with any of the things in the earth or with any of the other relationships. So let's go into Matthew 6:33. And again, we're just going to illustrate my take on why it's important to put God first. So there's something to be said for giving God a piece of your life. And then there's something also that happens when you make God a priority to your life. So God wants to be in the highest place in your life. And honestly, He deserves to be in the highest place in our lives, because it's not just that He created us, but He has completely designed the highest and best life that we could possibly have. And we have no idea what it is. And the guy that we work for has no idea what it is. And our sister-in-law has no idea what it is. There's no way for them to be able to show us what the highest and best use of our life is going to be. And the only way to find out what God's plan for you is to get into His Word. And we're not going to turn there, but Jeremiah 29:11 says that that He has plans to prosper us and to give us a hope and a future. So, and that's one of my favorite verses, live my life by that verse, I love it. But we're not going to turn there. Where we are going to turn, Matthew 6:33, and I'm going to go ahead and just start reading here. We're going to probably do maybe 33 and 34. So it says in verse 33, but first and most importantly, seek, aim at, and strive after His kingdom and His righteousness, and all of these things will be added and given unto you. So don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Now, each day has enough trouble of its own for sure. I know for every single person in this room and every single person who's watching online that there are things that worry us. There's things that cause us to, be concerned and cause us to not have full joy and full peace. And it is unfortunate. And that is something that we really hammer in the men's group. I mean, we absolutely hammer that topic of, how we can overcome anxiety by gratitude, and how we can find joy and hope by releasing our cares onto God and by trusting confidently in Him. So the point of this verse, 6:33, is really to show that if we seek Him first, then everything is going to be granted towards us. And if you look up towards, earlier in that chapter, it's talking about, take no thought saying, what should we eat? What should we drink? What are we going to wear? All those things, and it says don't worry about those things, but to seek first God, and He will make sure that everything else falls in line. So it's easy to say and it's hard to do. It's hard to say, okay, I fully trust in God and I no longer rely on myself. That's really ultimately what, in my opinion, the worry and the anxiety and the fear always comes from, is us trying to solve all the problems or trying to have all the answers or trying to sort everything out on our own before we've allowed God to weigh in or we've given it over to Him. And that was the way that it was intended to work. We were intended to give it to God. We see in that verse, 1 Peter 5:7. Actually, let's I don't want to turn there, but I have to because I don't want to butcher the. I don't want to butcher it, but it is. Let's see, it's such a small book. Come here, you. All right. Yeah. So submit yourselves, therefore, unto God. Says, submit yourselves, therefore, under God, under the mighty hand of God, and He will exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon Him, for He cares for you. 1 Peter 5, 6, and you can honestly go all the way to 10 because there's so many different great things in that chapter. But so verse 7 tells us to cast our cares on Him, and number 6 tells us to humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, and He will exalt us in due time. So part of where I feel like a lot of people, they get I know for me, I'll just speak from my personal experience. I feel sometimes discontent with where I am because I feel like, well, I should have been here by now, or this should have happened in this order. And, that's a real way to steal your own joy. I'm trying to remember who said it, but there's a quote that says that comparison is the thief of joy, something to that effect. And that's really the truth of it. So we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to other people or, even to our expectations of where we should be by this certain time. But if we submit under God, it's not our timing, it's His timing. So He is going to exalt us in the time that we are supposed to be exalted according to the plan which He laid out for us before we were ever born. As we see in Jeremiah 29:11, He has a plan to prosper us, not to harm us, to give us a hope and a future. And if we can humble ourselves under Him, then He will exalt us in the time that is appointed. So going back to it, I think, we get hung up on the way that we think things should go and the timeline that we think things should be happening under, and that causes us to enter into worry or gives us, anxiety and those types of things. So it's very important that we just cast our cares on Him, especially once we feel those things starting to rise up inside of us. So let's go ahead and shoot over to Philippians 4:19, and don't get too comfortable because we aren't going to be here long. So, talking about anxiety, talking about worry, talking about fear, but talking about why we should put God first in our lives. How are we supposed to, provide for our families? And that's a lot of things that people worry about is, not having the sufficiency that they'd like to in their finances or in other areas. Maybe, they feel like, they're not able to meet the requirements that they feel like they have. But honestly, let's look at this verse here. It says, my God will liberally supply your every need according to His riches and glory. So it's so hard for us to cast our cares on Him. Like, I know that I'm speaking specifically about like the financial hardship and that kind of challenge right now. That is like one of the hardest things for you to like swallow, if that makes sense. It's hard for you to sit there and be like, that you're not able to like make all of your financial obligations. And no matter what you do, it's hard to forget that is going on. It's always running around in the background of your mind. So I know personally that I've had that, and I know that is a very difficult thing to let go of. But we're supposed to let that go. We're supposed to cast all of our cares, all of our anxieties onto God. And when you release something like that, when you become developed in releasing that into God's care and into God's hands, then all of a sudden you're going to be able to get your joy back and your peace. It's hard. It's very hard, and but it's something that you can develop over time. It's just a matter of, here you go. And we'll look at another verse here that illustrates this point a little bit further. But, we see in the Word that there are verses, there are promises in here that we will stand on that are going to be able to allow us to overcome these different issues that we find in our lives. So the best part about the men's group is that everybody always has a unique perspective on, the way that they're approaching life or the challenges that they're facing and stuff. And then we get to go into the Word and try to find a spiritual way to combat those challenges. And, anxiety and fear being definitely a big one. Sowing and reaping, we've been talking a lot about that kind of stuff because, a lot of people, frankly, just have a hard time in their finances. And, if you are having difficulty in your finances, then sowing and reaping is the way to get out. I had a note a couple of pages back that, the reason that you don't sow is the reason that you don't reap. So if you only got $10 and you're like, well, this is the only $10 and I don't know when I'm going to get another $10, and you're not willing to even sow out of that $10, that's the reason that you're not going to be able to reap. You're going to have to really make that $10 work because, if you give that $10, then maybe all of a sudden God tells somebody to send you $100 that you weren't expecting. And then, it's us putting our faith in Him and not putting our faith in ourselves. And, faith in ourselves really turns into fear and worry and all those other things. So that's why I want to encourage you guys to try to get away from that. Let's jump into Psalms 37:4, which is another really great verse, which says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires and the petitions of your heart." So we talked about Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God. So instead of seeking yourself first, we're supposed to go to Him first. And what happens when we go to Him first is that we begin to see that everything that we're looking for is contained in His Word. Everything that we need is contained in His presence. Our strength becomes renewed like the eagles every single time we submit ourselves under God. And when we delight ourselves in Him, it says right here in Psalms 37:4, if you delight yourself in the Lord, He will give you the desires and the petitions of your heart. And what happens is once you begin to really delight yourself in the Word, when I first started studying the Word, I didn't, I would just do it for 5 minutes because, I felt like that was what I was supposed to do. And it was for sure, but, I was just doing it more out of obligation. But, as I began to learn more about what was contained in the Word, and I begin to, use the things that I'm reading in the Word and implement them into my life and see the fruit of it, all of a sudden, I enjoy to get into the Word, and I enjoy to find out what the promises are in there, and I enjoy to spend time in God's presence because it's, the highest and best use of my time. And it's, it's where all the answers that I need are. So for me, once you delight yourself in the Lord, the desire of your heart becomes the Lord. So you don't really need all the other stuff anymore, but God's still going to give it to you. But the more you become developed in delighting yourself in Him, the more time you spend with Him, the more time you're going to want to spend with Him. There's that verse in Jeremiah that says, seek Him and you will find Him, and then you will be found by Him. And that really is the truth. Once you get found by Him, everything that you need is there. And you're able to unlock the joy and the peace and the hope and all those things that we lose, when we stray away or when we're just trying to do everything in our own strength. The next book over in Proverbs, we're looking at Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. So it says, trust and rely confidently on the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own insight or understanding. In all your ways, know and acknowledge and recognize Him, and He will make your path straight and smooth, removing obstacles that block your way. That's exactly what happens. When we submit, when we trust in Him, when we give over everything to Him. We say, Lord, what would you have me do today? And who would you have me call? And what are the things that you would have me spend my time on? And once you ask him, if you're in a situation where you are not sure what to do, you've got a conflict at work, or you have, something that comes up and you need an answer, but you don't know what it is, and it's, a real Sophie's choice kind of situation. You got to go to God. You got to get the wisdom of God over those situations, because by doing that, by acknowledging Him and recognizing Him, like, Lord, what would you have me do? Um, then He's going to show you the right way in which you should go. And you want to be walking on a path that was directed by God. I don't want a path that was directed by Caleb, because that is probably not the best path. It might be like this, but God's going to give you that straight shot all the way through. He's going to give you the shortcuts, the things that you need in order to get where you're going in the fastest and easiest way. And ultimately, where we're going is where He's leading us. Where I'm going is not where I'm leading myself, because that would not be where God has for me to go. And where God has for me to go is far better than anywhere I can take myself. So I would rather submit to Him and find out what He's got going on, where He would like to lead me. And I like to get into His presence in order to find out what I should be spending my time on, and how the path is laid out that He has for me versus what I would be doing on my own. So what I've personally experienced is, there's a lot of different ways that we can do this, that we can acknowledge and recognize Him. We can do it individually over every situation. We can do it individually over every day. We can do it over different endeavors that we're doing and stuff before we begin a new project or something like that. We can invite Him into it and say, hey, I need you to touch over this. Or before we go on that sales call, we can go and we can invite Him, acknowledge Him over that. And any of these ways I think really works. But for me, I love to use every single opportunity and excuse to acknowledge Him and to bring Him into it. But it's also in our conversations, for us to be going through our daily life and not really sharing God with others is not fully acknowledging and recognizing Him in all of our ways. It's just part of it. And so that's something that I've been working on, starting to develop in. There's one or two guys in the group that are really just absolutely on fire. And they're, one of them, he's witnessed to 10 people in a day before over the last couple of weeks, because he's just so on fire. He's like, everybody at his job he's praying for, everywhere that he goes, he's praying for people and stuff, which I think is awesome. I'm not really, comfortable at this point doing that. So, but he is really taking that to new heights and stuff. But, you see what's happened in his life, and he's really been diligent to apply everything that we talk about in those meetings. Everything from sowing and reaping to everything from the sowing and reaping to speaking and to relying confidently on God. And he's actually had everything that he's been believing for come into his possession. I mean, he's started his own business. He's had, people give him like tractors, not tractors, but he's had people tell him that, hey, you can use my tractor whenever you want for your business, and you don't have to pay me or anything like that. He's had people give him, a truck for, 10% of what he'd be spending on a truck if he went out to go and buy it, and trailers and excavators, big machines for doing all his work. I mean, all these things that, he was seeking God first, and he was being diligent to sow. And the Lord brought those things to him. And he was putting his trust in God. He wasn't putting his trust in himself. That how am I going to figure these things out? He recognized that he needed to give those things over to God. And as soon as he did, it just started coming back to him. And the purpose of today is not really to talk about the benefits of sowing and reaping, but we're going to have him have to come out one day and talk about that, because he's got a really powerful testimony just of what's happened in the last 6 months. I would like to take us back to Jeremiah, which is going to be Jeremiah 17:7. And what we're going to see in Jeremiah 17:7 is, blessed is the man who believes and trusts in the Lord and relies on the Lord, and whose hope and confident expectation is the Lord. For he will be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that spreads out its roots by the river, and will not fear the heat when it comes, and its leaves will be green and moist, and it will not be anxious and concerned in a year of drought, nor stop bearing fruit. So, lot in here, and that is the Amplified version, so they kind of elaborate a little bit. I'll give you the King James. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, and whose hope the Lord is. For he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that spreadeth out his roots by the river, and shall not see when the heat comes, nor but her leaf will be green, and shall not be careful in the year of drought, neither shall it cease from yielding fruit. So God is going to make sure that we are constantly cared for and every single need that we have is met. But that's that first part, is that we have to trust in him. We have to put our confident expectation in him. So faith is a confident expectation. It's a knowledge. It is an undisputed knowing that God is who he says he is, that he is going to do what he said he was going to do. And for us to be confident in that, then we get to have what is called hope. And the hope is really, it's like a faith projected towards the future, but it's just a constant confidence that God is working on our behalf. And it's so funny because in my business, it's very unpredictable. You never really know what's going to happen. And so we'll be. I have my production manager. He kind of is like my partner basically, and he'll be looking at the calendar and say, hey, like we really need to fill up some spaces in this week or whatever the case is, so that we can stay busy and stuff. And I don't know how we're going to make the payroll this week sometimes, right? And I, he'll be freaking out about it, and I'll be like, don't worry about it. And he'll be like, well, why don't you ever worry? And then I'll read him some of these verses, and I'll be like, I don't have to worry, because I know where my help comes from. I know where my provision comes from. It's not me. So what is worrying about it going to do? Because it's not up to me. So if it was up to me, I'd be very worried. I see why you're worried, but I'm not worried because I know where my provision comes from, and it is every single time, and it amazes him. And it actually, I think it's a witness to him too, because he sees it actually play out, and he jokes about it too, but it's not a joke that God really does provide for my every need, just like all these verses that I've laid out for you. I mean, I wouldn't be up here spinning a yarn about something that I didn't really fully back, and I didn't fully believe in, and I didn't fully utilize in my own life. To be perfectly honest, these are all things that I just wish that I could use more of. I wish that I could figure out more ways that I could allow him to find more ways that I could invite him into my life, so I could acknowledge him in those dirty, dark corners of my life that, a lot of us, even forget are there, or we, try to forget are there, and, invite him into those and put confidence in him that he's going to be able to help me sweep out the dirt in those areas. So for me, this year has been really big. Just this last month or so, I really sat down and took the time to get into the Word and to try to get the mind of Christ about, acknowledge him and how he would have me go about my day really in this year. And I feel like, he really answered my prayer about that, so that I can be, I've been very diligent that every single day, the first thing that I do is I go and I sit down and I read my Bible for 30 minutes, and I write in my journal, and I just do, I study. Sometimes it's different chapters. Sometimes I'll study the notes in another journal from like a year ago, and it's crazy to see that I was reading the notes from my journal. So I have a journal that was basically most of last year, and then I have this one which is most of this year, or most of this past year, and then so I'm almost out of. So I got to start another one here. So I'll be able to go. Today's the 27th. Today's the 28th, so I'll be able to go to the 28th of last year, and I'll see what was I studying, what was I reading, what was I thinking about and stuff. And the 27th or the 26th or something, one of the last couple of days, I was reading in that journal, and it was the day that I decided that I needed to get sober, which I think is awesome. And it's been an absolute journey the last year, really trying to do that. But it was just really cool to see how much has happened since I made that decision and how long that process really was. But don't know how we got over there. I wanted to just encourage you guys about this. So by relying and confidently trusting in the Lord, we're able to be like that tree, that's planted right by the water. We're constantly being fed. We don't have to worry about it on a day when it gets too hot because we can just drink a little bit more water from the river. We're going to be good. Like, we don't have to worry about the drought because we're right here on the river. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly how it is. God is continually feeding us. And if we can just rely and tap into Him and rely and be confident in Him, we're not going to have to stop bearing fruit. And what happens when we bear fruit is we get to use that fruit to sow, and then we get to reap even more fruit. But again, today's topic isn't sowing and reaping, so I'm not really going to jump in there. I'm going to grab a quick sip of this, and then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about why we should persevere and find joy in trials. All right. So, why should we persevere and find joy in trials? I'm going to try to take this one at a little bit of a slower pace, but we'll start in James. We'll go to James chapter 1. Sorry, let me just make a quick note here. All right, so we're gonna start in James. And we really went deep into this first chapter, which I love. But like I mentioned kind of a little earlier on, the whole book of James is just, it's great. It's like Proverbs Junior almost. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at the first book of James. Let's look at verse 2 and into 3. Well, we'll see where we end up. Let's start at 2 though. So it says, "Consider it nothing but joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you fall into various trials." This is the Amplified version. "Be assured that the testing of your faith through experience produces endurance, leading to spiritual maturity and inner peace." And I'm going to stop there for just a quick second. So, and this is exactly how it was on Tuesday. We had to go like a couple verses at a time and then stop. And then we had to like really unpack it, and then we could keep going. So the first 2 verses here, we say, "Consider it nothing but joy whenever you fall into various trials." We are all constantly faced with trials and temptations. It is nonstop, and it's never going to stop for as long as you live. There's always going to be something that comes up that tests you, whether it's to engage into sin or to be angry or something. You never really know exactly what's going to happen, but there's always some kind of a challenge. There's always some kind of adversity. That is the only constant in life. How you deal with it is really the variable. But it says in verse 3 to be assured that the testing of your faith through experience produces endurance. which leads to spiritual maturity and inner peace. So what happens when you're spiritually mature is you have that inner peace, you have that hope, and you have that confidence, and you have that joy. So it says, consider it nothing but joy whenever you fall into those temptations. So we should be thankful for the opportunity to be developed in our faith, to be developed spiritually through the trials, through the temptations. In fact, without those trials and temptations, there's no growth. Like, there's no way for us to actually become all that we are intended to become unless we go through these challenges. The way that I put it for the guys the other day, we were talking about David, and David had to go and he had to fight Goliath. But what happened before David got to Goliath? Well, he fought the lion and he fought the bear. So I'm 29 years old and I have not fought my Goliath yet. And I don't know when that Goliath is coming, but I know it's not now. So I know that all the challenges that I'm being faced with right now are either lions or bears. So if I'm fighting lions and bears and I'm like, dude, this is just tough. Like, I don't like this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I'll never be able to get to my Goliath if I give up when I'm fighting the lion or when I fight the bear. So that was kind of the illustration that I shared with the guys, and this is something that we're thinking about a lot, is that every single thing that we're going through right now is training us for the next thing that God has for us. And so, like I said, I'm almost 30. When I'm in my 40s, don't you think that the challenges and the temptations that I'm going to be facing at that point are going to be more difficult than the ones that I'm facing right now? Because I will tell you that all the challenges that I was facing when I was 20, I don't even remember. I don't even know what they were. Like, they're insignificant. It doesn't matter. I'm not thinking about like that 1 or 2 weeks or that month or two that I was struggling in my finances when I was 20. Like, so when we get so stuck in the right here, right now, what's right in front of us, that it really stresses us out. But if we can just give ourselves a break and just say, hey, you know what? I'm actually glad that this is happening because I'm learning to be more frugal with my finances. Use these and remember that this is what is developing us. And it gives us an opportunity to really evaluate where we are in our faith. So if we continue on here, it says, let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. And if you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given to him. But let him ask in faith, not wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven but with the wind and tossed. So that's kind of the second piece of it too, is that, when we're in faith, we cannot be in doubt. My dad always says that you can have doubt in your head, but faith in your heart. And you want to make sure that you are not slipping into becoming that double-minded man that it talks about in verse 8. And, I have to stay on task here because this whole chapter we could just go through because there's so many great concepts. But I really want to stick on this perseverance and the temptations and the trials. So let's go to Romans 5:3-5, and we will just continue on with this subject. So in Romans 5, starting at verse 3, it says, not only so, but we glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulations worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope, and hope maketh not ashamed, because the love of God is shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Ghost, which is given to us. And if you look at the Amplified Version, it says, with joy let us exult in our sufferings and rejoice in our hardships, knowing that hardships, distress, pressure, trouble produces patient endurance. And endurance, proven character, spiritual maturity, and proven character, hope, and confident assurance of the eternal salvation. So it's almost exactly what we were looking at in James chapter 1, that if we are in tribulations, that we are supposed to be glad because we are being developed. And that's really the point that I want to make with these couple of verses here. is that that's what I like to do is I like to take the opportunity when I'm not where I want to be, whether it's financially or in my business or whatever the case may be, and be glad because I know, like, if it's slow, then it's only going to be slow for so long, and I need to take advantage of maybe not having to be as busy, and I can use that time to get caught up on some of the administrative things and stuff. But don't be like bummed out, and don't be allowing that to be an excuse for me not to be in joy. But I should be grateful because I know that once it switches, it's just a season, and once it goes into the other end, like then I'm going to be blessed, and I'm going to be in that abundance again. And when that happens, I don't want to say that I get into worry or I get into fear because obviously, if you're in a season of abundance, you're very blessed and very grateful. But I'm always conscious of the season that I'm in and starting to remember that, well, this season isn't going to last forever. So what's on the other side of this season is a season where it's going to be a little more difficult, and then so you got to prepare yourselves for those kinds of things. So no matter what season we're in, we see in that verse, I believe it's in Philippians, and I'll see if I can find it really quick. But yeah, so it says, not that I speak from any personal need, but I have learned to be content and self-sufficient through Christ, satisfied to the point where I am not easily disturbed regardless of my circumstances. And that's Paul speaking right there. And he says that no matter what, no matter where I am or what I'm going through, I am content. And that's ultimately where I would like for each of us to be able to get to, is where our confidence and our faith in God is not contingent on our circumstances. It's not contingent on the number in our bank account. It's not contingent on relationships or any of those different things. Like, if we can rely confidently and trust in God and find the joy even in those hardships and those trials, then we're going to be able to have peace. And we need the peace. Like, if you don't have peace, it's hard for you to be in joy. And if you don't have joy, then your life's just not going to be that much fun. And I don't know about you, but I want to have fun. I want to enjoy my life. I want people to enjoy being around me, and I want to enjoy being around other people. And, if you have the joy of the Lord, it is your strength. Like, you can face so many situations that maybe somebody who doesn't have that wouldn't be able to handle, simply because you are stronger than they are because of that joy of the Lord. And the way to tap into the joy of the Lord is, there's so many different ways. I mean, you can worship Him is a great way. You can pray. You can speak in tongues. You can get into the Word. Like, for me, what gives me like the joy and like the strength the most, I think, is just my daily declarations. I have like this 3 pages of daily declarations, and I read through them every day, and I get fired up when I'm reading them. I mean, it's like I used to read them. I would keep them on the dashboard of my car, and I would be reading them while I'm going to do sales calls, and I would just be like reading through them, and they'd just be getting me so stirred up and encouraged. And I don't know, a lot of you probably haven't been in that kind of setting where you're going and doing sales, but a lot of you have, and that it's very difficult to, like, you gotta do something to get yourself fired up before you go on those sales calls. And reading those daily declarations, and every single one is tied to a scripture of some kind, and it just gets me like fired up and encouraged about the Lord, that He is going to supply all of my needs because of His riches and glory. And I have like a sales prayer where I wrote out a whole prayer with some declarations, and it's all based on scripture. And I have a sales group that I've started now. It's called Sales Builders, and we meet once a week. So, we meet 5 times a week. It's every day at 11 a.m. weekdays, and we're just in there. We're drilling, we're training, and we start with the sales prayer. So that's the way that you can tap into the strength and the joy. one way anyway. That's the best way for me. I like to, and even if it's just under my breath in certain situations, I'll pray and I'll thank God for working out something on my behalf. And I want to kind of go over into Isaiah here in a moment. Let me just look at one thing first. Yeah. So let's go ahead and let's do 1 Corinthians 10:13, and then we can go into the Old Testament for a minute. So in 1 Corinthians 10:13 it says, "There hath no temptation taken you, but such is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above what you are able, but will the temptation also make a way to escape that ye may be able to bear it." Amen. So, what are they saying there? God's not going to give you a challenge that you're not fit to overcome. Now, that does not mean that you're going to overcome every challenge. That is not all. That's not God's fault. That's like our fault, because God is unable to not be faithful, but He's going to give us the opportunity and the knowledge, the way to overcome different situations. But it's up to us to make the right decisions. And a lot of it, I feel like, the last couple of weeks in the men's group, a lot of the guys have really been coming in there struggling with addiction, various different kinds of addiction. And, that is all about temptation. When you get that thought in your head that you want to go and do the thing whatever that is that you're addicted to, there's a chemical, there's a process in your brain that all of that falls under, and it starts with the temptation. And the temptation, you have control over your response to that temptation. And, depending on what that thing is, sometimes it's a lot harder to resist that temptation. But God has not given us a challenge that we're not able to overcome. And a lot of us, I struggled with drugs and alcohol for a long time, and it's all temptation, but it's how you respond to the temptation and how many times you responded the wrong way to that temptation that is going to tell you how hard it's going to be for you to, get through it. And, once you start basically making the right decision, when you're tempted and you say no, then all of a sudden you're casting a vote for the person who's free from that. And, obviously you want to ask God to break those chains off of you. And today's not necessarily to get off into how to overcome addiction, but I will say that addiction is a trial and a temptation. It is something that is going to develop you. It is something that God designed that you would go through in order for you to be able to, I like to think of it like God has allowed us to overcome challenges so we can help other people overcome those same challenges. So that's one of the many trials that we're going to face. Another one is, of course, the financial challenges, but also, there's anger, there's different other character flaws and stuff. There's situations that I don't even want to get into with family and children and different things like that. But there's so many things that I get to see through the men's group, and everybody has a different challenge. Whether a lot of them have the same ones or not, there's still a lot of different things that we are being tested with. So we should take joy knowing that we're being developed in those situations. It doesn't mean that those situations are going to get any easier. It doesn't mean those situations aren't difficult. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard to make the right decision. But God has not put us in a situation that we are not equipped to overcome. God is faithful, and He will not suffer us to be tempted above what we're able. But we are the ones who really need to commit to Him and to, make the right decision when we're faced with that temptation. So going into Colossians 3:10, Well, yeah, let's do Colossians 3:10, and then we'll go to the Old Testament. So, and we have put on the new man, which is renewed in the knowledge after the image of him who created him. So, back it up to 9, it says, for you have stripped off the old self with its evil practices and have put on the new spiritual self, who is being continually renewed in true knowledge in the image of him who created the new self. Now, I'm not going to go into this topic really too much because this, I think, is somewhat of a separate topic, which we've spent many meetings and many hours talking about, but the renewal of the mind. And what happens is, through the process of those trials and temptations, you're being developed, and what's happening when you're being developed is that you're becoming a new man, you're becoming a new person who is able to overcome those challenges. So I wanted to call attention to this verse here in Colossians because it's just really quickly draws attention to that point. That's what happens, is that we'll be continually renewed. We'll be putting on, it says here in the King James Version, that seeing that you have put off the old man with his deeds, doing the same old thing is going to get us the same old result. So part of the trials and the temptations is, just going back and doing the same old thing instead of being tested and doing the things that we're not supposed to do, or I'm sorry, that we should be doing instead of the things that we're not supposed to do. So we should be continually renewed and renewing the way that we respond to situations and trying to figure out through God what he would have for us to do. It says in Romans 12:2 that we are not to be conformed to this world, but we're supposed to be renewed in our minds, by God. It says, do not be conformed to this world, but be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Let's just turn there. Let me see if I can find it. Or I'll turn there. You don't have to go there. Because I got like 3 translations running through my head right now. Yeah, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And the Amplified says, do not be conformed to this world any longer with its superficial values and customs, but be transformed and progressively changed as you mature spiritually by renewing of your mind, focusing on godly values and ethical attitudes, so that you may prove yourselves what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect, his plan and purpose for you. So, powerful stuff. One of my favorite verses right there, Romans 12:2. Really, the renewing of the mind is something that I've been studying and working on over the last couple of years. Really, I don't want to be the person that I was last year. I don't want to be the person I was 5 years ago. I don't want to be the person I was 1 month ago. I want to be continually renewed, just like it talks about in this verse. I want to be continually renewed and continually developed, and I want to be continually focusing on godly values and ethical attitudes so that I can prove what his will is, that good and acceptable and perfect plan and purpose that he has for me. We were talking about Jeremiah 29:11. It says that his plan is to prosper us and not to harm us. And I want to be prospered. I don't want to be harmed. So I'm going to hang out with God, and we're going to figure this thing out. And he's going to show me what I should be doing, and I'm going to do it. Let's go to Isaiah, because it's getting late. I know you guys are ready to get to Denny's. I don't blame you. But let's go ahead and talk about this verse in Isaiah 57:10, and I promise I'll make it quick. This verse really, I was talking about when I used to do sales calls, and I still do a couple of them, but I used to do a lot more. But this verse, it's very, you get rejected a lot, or it's very, there's a lot of no's in sales too, especially when you're being developed in it early on. And so I had to go through that a lot, and it was very hard sometimes. And that's why those declarations were really helpful for me, was to be able, you're driving around from place to place, and you're not really, a lot of people don't say no right away, but they don't say yes, and to you that's just, they might as well have said no. You would have rather them said no than not, oh, I'll get back to you and stuff, and if you're not good at sales, you get, oh, okay, yeah, get back to me then. But so we're talking about Isaiah 57:10. It says, "You are wearied by the length of your road, yet you did not say it is no use. You found renewed strength, therefore you did not grow weak." So all of those little parts are. I found that verse one day when I was riding around. The Lord put it in my spirit, and I had to go and find it. And I was like, wow, that is an awesome verse, because I am getting wearied by the length of my road. And you might be getting wearied by the length of your road. It might not be sales. It might just be, a rough patch in your relationship. It might be, you're having a hard time with getting custody of your kids or something. You might be having a financial hardship. You could be, having some character issues. You could just be struggling with addictions of various kinds. There's so many trials and temptations and challenges that we are overcoming. But don't get wearied on the road. Don't look at it and be like, man, I've got a long, like for me, when I was first starting to get sober, I didn't realize how long the road was. And then once I started kind of having an understanding of how much work was going to be involved in it, I started to get discouraged. So don't do that. Do not get discouraged by the length of your road. And don't tell yourself it's not worth it. But get your strength renewed, and you will not grow weak. And we're talking about how you do that today. You go to God, you get in the Word, and you become encouraged. We're just talking about Romans 12:2 of not being conformed to this world, but being renewed in your mind by letting God transform you. So you're not going to be transformed by God if you don't spend time in His Word. You're not going to be transformed by God if you don't get in His Word, if you don't spend time in His presence. You need to absolutely, that should be, for me, that's my number one priority. Like, the first thing that I do before I start answering the phone, even if it's just saying I have a daily little prayer. It's super short, but it's every day. It's the first thing that I do is I read my daily prayer. So, and I have it taped up on my window in my office. So the first thing that I see when I walk in, I just go ahead and I pray. So I acknowledge Him with the very first thing that I do in the morning. And but I also like to take it one step further and spend the first 30 minutes of my day in the Word and reading and taking notes and just trying to hear from Him, and also praying and trying to get my daily declarations in there. But that is how we get renewed. Is we have to put time and effort and intention into our relationship with God, and it's progressive. We do it over time. When you're going to the gym, it's the concept is called progressive overload. And every time you go to the gym, you put on a little bit more weight, or you do one extra set, or you do a couple of extra reps, and that's how you get your muscles to grow. And your faith is a muscle, and your relationship with God is a muscle. Your relationship with your wife is a muscle. Your relationship with your finances is a muscle. And all these things you have to put time and attention and effort and intention into. Attention and intention. So you need to be attentive to those things, but you need to be thinking about it in the proper way, or at least taking time to think about it, and not just shooting from the hip and be like, well, whatever I have in my account is what I'm going to spend, or whatever interactions I have with my wife is what interactions I'm going to have with my life, or whatever relationship with drugs, or whatever chance I have to be tempted with drugs is the chance that I'm going to have to be tempted with drugs, or whatever the addiction is. But love that verse. Do not be wearied by the length of your road, but just be renewed. Find a way to be renewed. We've been talking about it all day. So let's talk about Joshua 1:9, and then I'm going to cut you guys loose. So Joshua 1:9 is part of the first chapter of Joshua. Those first couple of verses in this chapter are some of my absolute favorites for sure. We've covered a handful of my favorite verses today, really. Um, but this one really spoke to me, and I've really made an effort to implement this one in my life. Um, so I'm not usually when I go to Joshua 1, I'm talking about Joshua 1:8, which is talking about being prosperous and successful because you meditate the law or the Bible day and night, and you're careful to do everything that it says. So, but that's not the verse that we're talking about today. We're talking about Joshua 1:9, which says, well, let's back up. Let's go back to Joshua 1:7, and then we'll jump down to Joshua 1:9. So basically, what's happening is God is speaking to Joshua in this chapter, and he's saying, "Only be strong and be very careful to do everything in accordance with my word. And my servant commanded you, do not turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may prosper and be successful wherever you go." And then, obviously, in verse 8, he says, "This book of the law shall not depart from out of your mouth, but you shall read and meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything in accordance with all that is written in it. Then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will be successful." But then again, he says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong, be courageous. Do not be terrified or dismayed or intimidated, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." And I got to give credit to Brother Dan for pointing this out, because I didn't really register. I was like, well, this is, these two verses don't say the same thing. It's just kind of redundant. Like, I didn't really register it the way that he did. But he said, this is God really saying, like, Joshua, like, you need to be courageous. Like, you need to be strong. And he said it once, and then he told him, hey, here's how you're going to be prosperous, here's how you're going to be successful, here's what I want you to do, but I want you to be strong, I want you to be courageous. And so that is what we need to do in these trials and in these temptations, in these situations, these things that seem hopeless, like these long roads that we're looking at, and we're getting weary because we're seeing how long that road is, because we can't see the end of the tunnel. We got to be courageous, we got to be strong, because you know what? It's going to go by quickly. Like, if you can zoom out far enough, like, it really, everything that we're going through right now, like, you might be in a situation where, you're stuck on, something, and you have to do something for a year, like you might be in a probation program or something, and you have 1 year that you have to go through it. That's going to go by so quickly, because 1 year on the scope of your life is very, very small. And it might seem like a long road when you're in it, but it's really not. And it's going to go by before you know it. And then the next thing you know, you're on to the next thing. So every single thing in life is temporary. And it's very, very important for us to be courageous and strong when we're faced with these trials, and to be able to kind of keep ourselves encouraged, and to know where our strength comes from, and don't let anxiety and fear steal our joy, because we only have so much time in a day, and if we can acknowledge God and give Him part of it, He's going to be able to return some of that time back to us. And the highest and best use of our time, far and away, is to be getting into the Word, getting into His presence, and it's a demonstration of our faith. We're always talking about how can you build and develop your faith, and the way that you do that is by showing God that you believe in Him. You demonstrate your faith in Him by the way you spend your time. You demonstrate your faith in Him by your confidence and your trust in Him. When you sow your seed, that demonstrates your faith in Him, that He's your provider and that He's going to bless you in your finances. There's so many different ways. Like, if you think about it, like, God is watching every single thing that we do, and the things that we do need to illustrate to Him that we believe in Him, and that our confidence and faith is in Him, and it's not in ourselves, and it's not in our jobs, and it's not in our businesses, and it's not in our brother-in-law. We need to demonstrate our faith in Him. So that's most of what I wanted to talk about today. It's actually probably all of what I wanted to talk about today. It's all of what we have time for me to talk about today, because there's other stuff that I would love to get into. But so, number one, why should we put God first in our lives? Because He is our provider, and He is the one that all good things come from God. So we should be putting Him first in our lives. It's everything that we need is going to be from Him. He's going to direct our paths if we acknowledge him in everything. He's going to give us the wisdom. It said in that, and we don't have time to go all the way back over there, but it says that he who asks for wisdom, let him ask in faith, not wavering or not having any doubt in their mind. So wisdom over situations, he's going to give us the path, and he's going to prosper us. He's going to renew our strength. He's going to renew our minds. And why should we persevere and find joy in the trials? Because it demonstrates to God that we believe in him and that we are a person that he can trust and rely on too. Trying to think about there was this verse. So why should we persevere and find joy in trials so that we can prove ourselves to be an approved workman? That's where that verse is. I can't think of it. And I think it's in James, to be honest with you. Yeah, okay, so 2 Timothy. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So that is what we are to be doing. We are to be spending time in the word, studying to show ourselves approved. And, we were talking about this verse in Joshua 1:8. If we study the book of the law day and night and we're careful to do everything written in it, then we're going to be prosperous and successful. And, being prosperous and successful means that you are going to make the right decisions when you're in these trials and in these temptations. And the perseverance is the development of our faith, which allows us to be able to believe for bigger and better things. Be able, like the people that are able to take the most crap are the people who are able to go the furthest in life. So with that being said, I am going to go ahead and cut it off. You guys are welcome to make your offering, your donations online. I'm not sure exactly how you do that on website covenantchristiancenter.net. Yep, and they have PayPal and everything on there. So, Father God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for this these people. Thank you for the opportunity to be encouraged by them, Lord. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I ask that you would give each and every one of these people an impartation, Lord. And I thank you for blessing the work of their hands, Lord, blessing the seed that they sow. And I thank you for 100-fold return, Father God. Thank you, Lord, just for the seed of their time and their attention, Lord. I thank you for the seed of them coming and watching these replays and being here in person, Lord. I thank you that you are blessing each and every one of them, that they're going to have a harvest, Lord, bounty that they don't have room enough to receive. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen.